Here I'm going to go over the solution for the Howler program. This is a solution. I really always want to stress that this is the way I wrote the program. It passes the tests that I wrote for myself. However you choose to solve the program in a way that you understand and which works for you is fine, is great. So I'm going to show you a solution, and if you have something significantly different, do please write me. I'd love to hear from you. So we've gotten to the point where no matter where the text is coming from, the input text, if it's coming from directly from the command line or from a file, we have that taken care of. So really there's two input options and there's two output options. So the command line, standard out, or a file. So we've already handled the first possibility. And we've resolved that in such a way that by the time we get here, that's been handled. We know about upper, right? So we could just do this. And if we do this, like for instance, we looked at foo bar baz, it prints foo bar baz, which means if we run make test, we should be passing that now. So I see that we're passing the variety where we're supposed to print to standard out. It's failing when we're running it with an output file. So it's running with the output file, and it's expecting that this is going to go into some sort of an output. And we can verify this. We could run this, and we could say -o, let's just call it out.txt. And we see that yes, we're still printing to standard error, and I'm sorry, to standard out, and the output file, if we cat out.txt, well, it doesn't exist. There, we can ls, there is no out.txt. That didn't happen. So one way we could solve this would, and we saw this in the intro, I could say file is equal to open args.out, and open that for writing text. Okay, let's try that. If I run this, perfect. It has created this output file, and it did not print a standard out. And if I cat out.txt, yes, that works. Let's run make test and see how we're doing. Okay, so the reason why I wanted to run the test is because the line of code that we just added broke the previously passing test. So the previously passing test tested that the output came to standard out. But what are we doing here? We're always printing to the result of opening args.out. Well, what happens? What is args.out? What is the default? Well, it's the empty string. So it's trying to open some file called the empty string. And there's no such file or directory. We can't open the file called the empty string. That's just really not possible. So that's the whole point of testing, is that you write you write the code to pass a test, and then you try to move on to the next one. And it's very possible that the next thing that you try to fix ends up breaking 3 other things that used to work. And you wouldn't know that if you weren't testing your program. So I've already written these tests in a way that hopefully guide you to writing a functional program. As you're writing your own software, when you have a new feature that you want to create, the first thing you do is you write a test that verifies that this feature does not exist. Then you add that feature, and then you verify now it passes the test where the program is supposed to do this new thing. And if at any point you add another new feature, you do the same thing. You add the test, you run the program, you add the feature, and then you run all the tests again so that you verify that you didn't break anything that used to work. Okay, so obviously this code doesn't work. But something like it, we're going to use this if it's there. We could, for instance, let's leave that there. We could say if args.out, so if there is something there, then print that. Else, we're just going to print this. Else we're just going to print. That should work. So if there's something in args.out, then we're going to print the uppercase text into that, opening that as a file. Let's run our test. Well, first off, let's just run it. That looks okay. Let me cat out. Okay. Let's run it without the output option. prints to standard out. It looks like it's okay. What does the test suite say? Okay, that actually is now passing for both standard out and for printing to standard out and to printing to an out file. But this is failing. Test file is failing. What is it failing? Unrecognized. Oh, it's called out file. Okay, so that was something that I messed up here. I need to make sure that this is called out file. And again, that's I wrote these specifications myself, and I forgot that that was the name of the parameter. Without the test exercising both the long and short names for this, I would have not written the program correctly. So let's see if that works. Namespace. Okay, so now I'm still calling it out here. It's supposed to be called out file, and so we need to make sure that we change it in both places. Let's run this, and now we're passing all of our tests. And so if you understand the program as it is right now, great, you can stop where you are. I'd like to point out a couple things though that bother me about this program. One is that I've got two print statements and they're both printing the exact same thing. The only way they differ is in what the output file is, the file handle. So let's look at another way to write this. Let's make that into its own line of code. We can say, like for instance, output file handle, we could call it, and we could initialize it to nothing, none. I'm not sure what we want to put there. And can move this. So what we're going to want to do is to just call one print statement, and it's going to be printing to the output file handle. And so we could say, if there is something for args.out file, then our output file handle is equal to opening that as write text. Else our output file handle is going to be equal to sys.standardout. And I introduced this in the introduction that sys.standardout is always available to you. You never have to open it. So we don't want to open sys.standardout. It is a file handle and we can use it. And now if we run this, how did I get into? Looks like I got into there. Didn't mean to get into Python. Let's run make test. Go into our Powler and run make test and see how we're doing. So that works. That's a lot. It's a little bit cleaner. I still don't like the fact that there's 5 lines of code here and output file handle has been repeated 3 times. So there's a much shorter way to write this using an if expression. And it looks like this. Output file handle is equal to open this if we have args out file, else sys.standardout. So these 5 lines of code can be written more succinctly in 1 line of code. And in this 1 line of code, out file handle has only been mentioned 1 time. So if this is true-ish, if there is something in output file, so if it's not the empty string or none, then this evaluates to true-ish. So if there is something there, then open that for writing. Else, by default, we'll use sys.standardout. This should pass. Let's make sure. We're refactoring our code and we're using our test to make sure that we haven't broken anything. That works a little bit better. I like that. Another way that we could write this, we could say outfh.write. I'm going to take this. We're going to write the uppercase, but here we're going to need to make sure to add the new line because write won't do that. So this is another way to write this. And technically, since we've opened a file handle, we should close it. Even though really it will get closed as the program ends, and that will just happen by default. So let's run our make test and make sure it still works, passes all of our tests. That is pretty much the way that I would write this program. So I'm showing you here these 5 lines can be more easily written with a single if expression. So this chooses our output file handle. I could either write this with a print statement and say file is equal to out file handle, or I could use the write method of the output file handle. And in this case, when I'm printing, I do not need to add a new line because print will do that by default. When I call write, I need to manually add the new line because write will not do that. And then I need to close my file handle when I'm done. In the next video, I'm going to talk about some lurking dangers with the way that I've written this that could cause problems if we're reading very large files.